My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska. My mission, as always, is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. And today we're going to be talking about the things about Alaska that should make you afraid of Alaska. There are a lot of great parts of living up here, and also it can kind of be a risky place to live. And so for that reason, we're going to make this video here today for you to kind of give you an idea for what things you should be afraid of Alaska for. Before we get started though, as always, give this video a like, subscribe, do all the good things you have to do to make sure the algorithm blesses this channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. This first one is kind of low-hanging fruit, and that is the wildlife in Alaska. It is wild, it is unpredictable, and no matter how much of a connection you feel you have with the wildlife here, it's still wildlife, and it will still have no problem at all stomping the ever-living daylights out of you, or, other things, and depending on what animal it is, I'm thinking bears. So, yeah, wildlife is wild, treat it with respect, give it distance, and even when you do that, things can still go south. So yeah, Alaska is scary for that reason. Second reason I would give you to be afraid of Alaska is that the seasons change, and when they change, the risks that you have to look out for are drastically different. Like if we're here during the summertime, my main concern is going to be the wildlife, and it's going to be if we're crossing rivers, then it's obviously going to be a lot higher than what you would normally have, because as it gets hotter up in the mountains, the snow melts faster and all that goes down to the river, and the river is going to rise and go a lot faster. So that's one of the big concerns I'm going to have during the summertime. During the wintertime, though, whole new set of things to be afraid of, such as avalanches or hypothermia. Frostbite is just a whole different set of things to be concerned about. Third thing that I would really be thinking about is going to be the homeless population, which, with the homeless population, I will let you go ahead and Google it and let you take a gander and guess as to where the homeless population is. Usually kind of centered around some specific areas. Like I said, I'll go ahead and let you take a gander and figure that out online. But yeah, homeless population, it is here. And, if that's not your cup of tea, be aware of it. Now this next one, I think it has a lot more mystery around it than it really deserves, and that is the Alaska Triangle. And if you're not aware, the Alaska Triangle really goes up to Barrow, Alaska, goes down to Anchorage, Alaska, goes to Southeast Alaska, and then cuts all the way up back to Barrow again. And within that triangle, you are going to have an enormous expanse of just wilderness where there's just not a whole lot of civilization or chance for support at all. And they've had a lot of disappearances in this Alaska Triangle over the years. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but I know a lot of people do go missing there. It's not honestly a huge surprise, not necessarily because, it's the Alaska Triangle. No, it's because it's a huge piece of wilderness where it's difficult to get into and difficult to get out. So if you're going to go missing, something's going to go sideways, then good chance it's going to be in an environment like that. But just because there's so much wilderness, I'm going to give that another thing to be afraid of Alaska for. As if all of the typical physical things up here aren't enough for you to feel spooked out, there are a lot of Alaska Native legends and myths up here that are just downright creepy. And if you're, ever bored of an evening and just trying to find a way to scare yourself, then go ahead and take a gander at some of these Alaska Native myths. You get some real good ones in here. One of my favorites was Kushtaka. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's like a half-human malevolent spirit kind of inhabiting like an otter/humanoid thing that lures people into the woods by imitating like a child or someone that they know. And, you can imagine how the rest of that story ends when they follow it. So lots of great material there for Nightmare Factory if that's what you're into. So go enjoy. Now let's go and take a break real quick. For those of you who have been watching for a bit, you do know that I have a relocation guide for those of you considering moving up here. So do feel free to reach out on my website. A link for that is in the description section down below. Just make sure you put relocation guide in the comment section so I know what to send you. And also, we do have the weekly podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast, where I talk with people who've recently moved up here or talk with people who have lived up here for years about what it's like living up here, and a lot of topics about Alaska to give you a good sense as to what it's like actually from the street view living here. So do make sure you go take advantage of that. Link for that is in the description section down below. And let's go and finish today's video. Another big thing to be afraid of in Alaska are mud flats. I've talked about this a number of times before. I will probably mention it every time just because it's bad news and I want everyone to be aware of it. So what mud flats are is there's obviously a lot of glaciers that have been in Alaska in the past, and that glacier, as it goes across the terrain over the centuries, grinds down all the rocks into a very, very fine silt. That settles into a lot of places where water collects, and usually right by the ocean, because that's where all streams eventually end up. As you get there and you got all this mud that has all this silt in it, you stand out there, you slowly sink down into it, and it actually suctions onto your foot, your shoe, or whatever. And what this does is it really traps you, and it'll suck you right down into the mud, and you really don't have much of a chance to get out by yourself. And the bad news is that even if, you've still got some time, before you go under, quicksand style, you've got an incoming tide with the ocean coming in as you're dealing with all of this. So if you do find yourself stuck in mud flats, do not try to figure it out. Call someone immediately to get them out there. Believe me, a couple $1,000 or whatever to have the emergency crew come out there and get you out is gonna be a whole lot better than realizing you waited too late and they can't get to you in time before the tide gets there. So yes, mud flats, they're scary. Stay away from them. I wouldn't even mess with them because, we've heard so many bad stories about mud flats, and a lot of really scarring, traumatic stories about mud flats. So Alaskans are going to tell you don't mess with them, and I'm telling you the same thing. Okay. This next one really depends on where you're at, and that is Muskeg. Now, what Muskeg is, this is where the water, you're living in an area that's like so marshy and like so waterlogged, where you actually step onto the ground, it looks really stable, and it's really just like a thin layer of like earth that's kind of just floating on like the surface. So it looks really solid. You step on it, you can step your foot right through it into the water down below. And if you live in an area with a whole lot of muskeg, you really kind of look forward to the winter time because at least the ground is like solid. During that time, you don't have to worry about falling through. Another thing to keep in mind, if you are living in an area where you have a lot of trees and a lot of wind, there's a good chance you're going to have some power outages occurring during the winter time. Now, usually in South Central Alaska, these are very short kind of power outages, and you just kind of wait it out. If you have a wood stove or something, you just fire that right up and you're good to go. But there are times where it's going to be a little bit longer, and if you're someone who is always kind of preparing for the worst case scenarios, power outages are definitely something to be afraid of. This next one is kind of a pet peeve of mine, and that is earthquakes. I know it's kind of weird to say that's a pet peeve. We'll say it's a fear of mine. There we go. That sounds better. But earthquakes can happen at any time of the year, and it really does not care what you're doing at all. It just happens. There's no warning. It's not like you're looking like on the forecast and they're like, oh, it's going to be like 30 degrees outside and there's a 50% chance of an earthquake. So there's zero warning, anything like that. So they're pretty small earthquakes, and you barely even talk about it with other people who live up here just because they're so common, and houses and buildings are built in a way to kind of go with the earthquake. So they really only have like some cosmetic cracks here and there. But you do get some pretty big ones from time to time that really rock your world. So earthquakes, I'm going to put that on that list. I would be remiss if I did not bring this one up, and that is during the winter time, you're on the road, you're surrounded by a lot of people, and you're kind of struck with the fact that a lot of your safety on the road is not as dependent on you as it is on the driving skills of those around you of driving on the ice. And that's especially scary when you realize that there's just a constant influx and outflux of people in Alaska, and there's a good chance a sizable portion of the people on the road have never driven on ice before at the beginning of the year. So for that reason, the first snow of the year, I usually try to stay home as much as I possibly can to give everyone else kind of a chance to kind of work through the kinks of driving on the snow again, because even if you've lived here for a while, it's still been about, it's like 4 or 5, 6 months since last you drove on ice. All right, this last one is going to be a little cheesy, but bear with me. Once you've lived in Alaska, you will always compare every northern kind of alpine environment to Alaska. And it's kind of an unfair comparison because, Alaska is kind of that top shelf, last frontier location. And, nothing wrong with these other places, but it will kind of make these other places seem a little bit more vanilla compared to Alaska after you've lived up here for a while. So, kind of cheesy, but there you go. I sure hope this video has been useful for you. If it has, again, give this video a like. Reach out to me if you have any questions about moving up here or about real estate in general. Thanks for watching. See you next time.